Good morning everyone, welcome to the next bi-weekly TMS webinar, this time on weldments and sheet metal, where the title will be Fabulous Fabrication. My name is Craig and today we'll have a joint webinar with both myself and one of my colleagues, Lewis. We'll take you through a couple of steps in the creation of a basic metal staircase. We will show you the different features that can be used in both sheet metal and weldments and how we can combine them in a single part. And then we'll show off a little new feature new in SOLIDWORKS 2018 called the tab and slot feature. So I'll hand it over to Lewis to start with, and he'll take us through some of the weldment section, and I'll be back to myself for the sheet metal part.
Thanks very much, Craig, for that introduction. So first thing we're going to look at this morning is some SOLIDWORKS weldments functionality. Now we're going to start off by tidying up our feature tree. Now the first thing you want to do when you're working with weldments is make sure that you have the weldments tab actually turned on. If not, you can right click any existing tab and select weldments. Now once that's enabled, as I said, we can take a look at the feature tree. Now, when you start to use the weldment functionality within SOLIDWORKS, you'll find that the tree can get pretty cluttered with lots of different objects, structural members, and so on. You may want to group these. So a useful function is the Add to New Folder option. So by adding folders to the tree, we can keep things tidied. Now, we've got a two-dimensional sketch which we've previously created, and we're going to use this to produce the structural members which make up this staircase. Now you can use a combination of 2D and 3D sketches. Now within the weldments tab we have the weldment option, and when we select that, what it's going to do is take any solid bodies in our feature tree and convert them to a cut list, and the cut list is going to come in handy much later on. Now, how do we get structural members? We use the structural member tool, and within that tool we have a variety of options for selecting from various standards. We've got various types and also lots of different sizes that we can choose from, and this is a library which comes out of the box with SOLIDWORKS, but it can be fully customized as well. Now when we select a specific profile to use, we really only need to start clicking the sketch entities. There's nothing complicated about this, it's nice and straightforward. And we can also mirror the profile about the horizontal or vertical axis. And if we want to be specific about how that profile sketch is orientated, we can use the Locate Profile option. Now what you'll see when locating a profile is that any sketch points within the profile are selectable. When you choose these, it allows you to reposition the structural member relative to your sketch line. You can also use the rotation options to set the rotation of the structural member and then continue clicking to create a continuous group. And you can see that these are automatically mitered at the various intersections where corner treatments are applied. By default, this is miter, but you can choose a variety of different options in there. Now the next thing that we're going to do here is add the handrail structure, and again we're going to be using the structural member tool to achieve this. This time we're simply sticking with the same standard and choosing a different type, a structural circular tube profile, and setting our size, and then from there we're setting the groups. And as you can see, it's just a simple case of clicking each entity, and that gives us the result that we're looking for. So you don't need to use separate sketches for these, you can use an individual sketch. We have an option here as well called Merge Arc Segment Bodies, which we're going to deselect. Now that we've got the main handrail completed, we need to add in the supports. So again, this is the same process, and you can see that it's automatically mitering round the handrail as it reaches, but there is an area down at the bottom of that supporting rail which we're going to have to come back and trim slightly later. Before we get to that point though, we're going to finish off the rest of the railings, and again we're going to use a circular tube of a different size to achieve this. So without repeating myself too much, you can see that we just continually click each segment, and the merge segment option allows us to blend these all together into a continuous piece. So that's starting to look good, shaping up quite nicely. We've got a variety of different structural members in there, but we need to use this tool here, the Trim and Extend tool, to fix not necessarily an error, but just an area that needs a bit of cleaning up and sharpening. It's not exactly very precise at this point in time, so we need to clean that up by using the Trim Extend tool. Now this is a really handy tool. It allows us to select bodies which we would like to trim. We can allow an automatic extension of those, which we're going to need to do in this case because the blue bodies that we've selected are too short for the application. We can then choose how we want to trim them and select what we want to trim them against. So I'm going to select another body, and you can see that the automatic extension option that we selected is extending these up to the end of the body we've selected to trim with. And it gives us some nice options in the graphics area that we can simply click to choose the areas that we would like to keep and discard. And upon making those selections, you can see that the result is very accurate. Now, what we aim to achieve on this vertical piece is that this would have holes drilled in it, allowing the handrail sections to just pass through it. So you can see that what we're doing here using the Trim Extend tool is selecting the vertical tube to be trimmed. It's yellow just now because it's selected, and we want to use these pink trimming bodies to punch a hole through it effectively. So when we go ahead and select that, we get the result that you would expect there. Now we've really completed all of the handrail pieces that we need. There are some other areas which we could trim up, and then from there we're going to create a base plate which is going to be used to support the bottom of the staircase. You can see that when we use the Trim Extend tool that we can actually use a face rather than a body to trim, so we have a couple of options there, and it's a very flexible tool. And we'll do the same down the bottom here, again using the fly-out selection bars in the graphics area to make our picks. So as I said, we're going to move on now to adding in a base plate. Now this base plate will not be a structural member, so this will appear in the cut list slightly differently, and we'll get some information about this base plate like its bounding box, so how long it is, how wide it is, how deep it is, and so on. And this information can be useful if we were taking this piece of metal and nesting it in a larger sheet to be cut out. And when we take a look at the sheet metal examples that Craig will bring to us, you'll see some very similar things there. So very straightforward, we're just creating a basic rectangle to produce this extrusion. And you'll see that once we complete this extrusion, it's actually going to interfere with our structural member. So we're going to have to trim the structural member which makes up the main frame of the staircase. We're going to have to trim that to fit perfectly onto the base plate. So again, as you've already seen, the Trim Extend tool can be used to trim structural members, and that's the tool that we intend to use for this operation. Now, if you use the Extrude Boss Base command within Weldments, you'll see that the Merge Result option in the Property Manager is automatically deselected, and this allows things to remain separate from one another for addition to a cut list. So as I was saying, the Trim Extend option here is going to be used. I'm going to select a face or a body rather to select to trim, and you can see that we get the same options that we've seen before. So Weldments is a really fast workflow. There's very few clicks required to get to your end result because everything is contained within pretty much the same property managers. Now we're making a selection of all the elements here and right clicking to create a sub-weldment because we want this to be available as a separate cut list so that we could say produce a drawing of just one side of the staircase and then a drawing of the other side and so on. And we've went to all the effort of creating one side, and this will be symmetrical. So rather than go to all the effort of creating the other side from scratch, we're going to use a plane, and we're just going to simply mirror everything that we've created already across using the mirror tool. And this is going to impact our cut list almost instantaneously. And we're going to make sure that this also appears as a sub-weldment as well. Again, just allowing us to keep things structured really well. And the cut list is going to basically double all the quantities of these items. And this is really quick, and it gives us the results that we're looking for fast without a lot of effort on our part. You can imagine how long it would take if you couldn't just simply mirror things over in SOLIDWORKS with working with Weldments. You would have to create it all from scratch. So we'll go ahead and select our cut list here and just take a look at some of the sub-weldments that have been created. You can see that we're getting all the properties that you would need, things like the lengths, the materials, properties, and so on. Now that's just a little bit on the Weldments tools available within SOLIDWORKS regarding fabrication. And to take that to the next level, I'm going to hand over to Craig, and he's going to take us through some of the sheet metal tools that can be used within Weldments or sheet metal.
All right, thanks for that, Lewis. So I'm just going to go through now some of the sheet metal steps for making a staircase. So we've kind of got that outside the kind of shell of it. Now we actually need to kind of go through steps and literally add in the steps, kind of no pun intended there. So what we're going to do is, once we have those side edges, we're going to first want to add in a base flange for our first initial step. So we're going to create an initial sketch, given that outline, making sure the rectangle is connected to both the top and the bottom sides of those frames. Once that's added, we're going to add in a couple of dimensions. So we've got a fully constrained part, making the step 200mm long. And then we want to make sure it's kind of not sticking out the front or back. So we're just going to add in a dimension from the center of that step, just to the very front edge, making that 150. We're then going to convert that over to a base flange. Now for the thickness, rather than manually entering a thickness, we're just going to use a gauge table that SOLIDWORKS kind of already comes with SOLIDWORKS, where we could go around and kind of make our own gauge table if we wanted to. But here we're just going to go for the gauge 3, keeping kind of some of the default parameters, things like the radius, the K factor, the auto relief. We're going to kind of leave that default, but it can be customized where we need to. We're next going to add in some edge flanges along both the front and both the left and right sides. So we're just going to select the edge flange feature and then just kind of dragging that roughly in the direction we want before we add in the dimensions. So what we're going to want is we're going to want all three of these to be the same length. That's why we're just doing it all in the one feature. And then we're going to set the length to be 50mm in total. And obviously once we do that, we're going to want to add in a back plate. Because that's kind of going in a different direction, we're going to do that as a separate feature after we've done this one. So obviously we want that material still to be inside, so we're happy with that default setting. Now also we're going to add in that edge flange up the back, keeping the exact same dimension of 50mm. What we'll notice is when we select this, the edge flange is actually like a slight gap to the edge because we created that other edge flange first. So what we can do is we can just kind of move the position of that so that it's on the side of it, and it will move the initial edge flange down to the second one, and it will still create that little gap for us so it's touching the sides of the frame. Next, what we need to do is we need to think, well, how are we going to attach that to our weldment section? So what we're just going to add in is we're going to add in a couple of holes that we could then use for things like screws, bolts, just to secure that in place. So we're just going to add in some drill holes now, the size of 10, and we're wanting to select the through all option so it goes not only through our sheet metal part, but also the weldment part. So we just kind of roughly position them in place. We'll then start adding in a couple of dimensions and relations to get them in the position we want. So I quite like to use the construction lines. Gives us that kind of center point of that, and then we can just add in a coincident relation for both of those circles, getting that in the middle before adding some smart dimensions in so that we keep it the same distance from the sides. Obviously I've dimensioned that up to the middle, it just kind of depends on our design intent a little bit how we want to dimension that up, but I want to keep that 50mm from the sides. So once that's added, we need to obviously add those holes into the other side of our edge flange. So we're just going to use the mirror tool, and rather than creating another plane, what we can do is we can just use the plane that was created previously by Lewis. We're just going to use that plane and mirror those holes over. So now that we've kind of got our first step created, what our next step is to actually kind of create a pattern and then use the linear pattern feature. So what I'm doing is I'm just going to create an initial sketch using a construction line, and what I'm going to use is I'm going to use that line as our base for the linear pattern, and this will be the edge that we're going to select to use as our direction. Obviously I could have selected some of the edges on the Weldment section, but personally I just quite like to add in that little extra sketch, makes things a little easier to see as well. So if we come over to our linear pattern feature, for our direction we're just going to select that line, making sure the arrow's pointing the right way. We could flip it if need be. Now rather than pattern a specific feature, we're going to want to select the bodies option. That allows us just to select the step, then we can go in and enter how much we want the distance to be, obviously the distance between each of those steps, and then how many steps we actually want. So if we set that to about 9 steps, that gets us just about to the top. We're obviously just shy of that top step. So what we need to do next is, where we've created a linear pattern for the step body, we now need to create a pattern for the actual holes that we created. So we're going to select the hole wizard and the mirror to be patterned up, keeping the distance and the instant count the exact same. You can see that it's added that in there. We could also go in later on and add in some bolts if we want. So the next step is to add in that top final step. So again, we're going to do it the exact same way we did the first one. Create an initial sketch for our outline, making sure it goes to the very edge that could then lead on to maybe second floor, something like that. Again, we're going to need to just dimension up that last part. What we can do is we can just dimension that to the next step down. So we're just going to select that edge and add in a distance there. And then once that's done, we're going to go back to our sheet metal part and then select our base flange again, making sure the direction is in the downward direction so we don't have kind of steps sticking up in the wrong direction. Going to keep the exact same parameters. Don't obviously want to have oddly sized steps. Now this is where we're going to add in a new feature that's new to SOLIDWORKS 2018 called the tab and slot feature. So rather than using maybe say a weldment to weld this part in place or adding in additional parts for screws or bolts, what we can do is we can use the tab and slot feature, and we're going to affect both the weldment and the sheet metal part in one go. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to first, I personally quite like to select the edges first. So I'm going to select the start and kind of end point of that. Then I'm going to select the kind of face that we want that to go up to. Followed by, we're going to then have to select the edge that we want to be the tab and slot to meet, making sure that we select that smaller edge rather than the longer edge, because obviously it doesn't go the full way. It will give us a little preview of what that looks like. I'm happy with 10 tab and slots being there, but what I want is I want a kind of a square tab and slot. So I'm just going to make sure the length and the height are the exact same. Add in a little fillet at the corner, just of 1 mil. And then for the slot, what I want is I want quite a kind of tight fit. So I've set that just to 0.1 of a millimeter, so it fits in really tightly, and it's kind of, the top platform's not going to kind of shake about when someone walks on it. So we can see a kind of a little preview of what that kind of looks like, how it's affected both parts. But obviously what we do want is we do want to mirror that over to the other side. So again, because we already had that feature selected, it's populated that box for us, using the exact same mirror plane that was created in the Weldment section and putting that on the other side. What we can do is we can then check if has that maybe affected the Weldment part at all. So we might then start thinking, well, do we want to change how that is, change the instant count, or do we want to maybe think of, well, when we're actually physically building this, think of the order that we're actually wanting to build it. So maybe we want to put that top step on first, and then we can start adding in the handrails. What we're going to want now is an edge flange for that front section. So we're going to select that edge, bring it down using the exact same dimension of 50 that we did earlier on, keeping it consistent throughout the model. But this time what we'll notice is, because we used that tab and slot feature, the edge kind of goes a little bit too far than what we would like. So we can just edit that profile, adding in some dimensions so we've got a little gap there and it's not kind of overlapping our tab and slot feature. So we've selected that on one side, we obviously just need to do that on the other side as well. So if you just come out with the smart dimension feature and we can just drag that point across, then we can add in a smart dimension. Sometimes if you're editing this a couple of times, it can be a little hard to select the vertex point that you want. So you can just use another point that is on kind of the same plane. So you'll see here that I'm just going to select a slightly different edge, but it's going to give us the exact same dimension that we want once we enter our value. So now what we'll do is if we come out to kind of like an isometric view of the model, we can get a little bit of a preview of what it looks like. We obviously might want to go in and make some changes, add a little bit of appearance, things like that. So what I've got is I've just got a little kind of 360 animation that kind of shows you a little bit what it looks like after a little bit of additional work, just adding some appearances, editing the material, things like that. And you can see it's starting to kind of look a little bit realistic. Maybe some of you have got kind of similar like stairs like we have at work. So that kind of takes you through a couple of the steps of weldments and sheet metal. So hopefully you guys have enjoyed that and learnt a few things. So I think most people probably would have created a similar part using an assembly, but we've kind of just shown there you can keep it all in one part, use those features on the left, make sure you sort them into the folders, that kind of thing. So again, if any guys have any questions relating to the webinar, you can obviously send us an email. We'd be happily answer them for you. And hopefully we'll see some of you again in a couple of weeks' time for our next webinar. So thank you all for watching and listening. Hope you guys have a good day and enjoy your weekend tomorrow. Thanks a lot, guys.